Welcome back. We're watching day one of the fugitive sex offender trial for Nicholas Rossi. He's accused of raping 2 women in 2008 in Utah and was arrested 13 years later in Scotland. Now, since then, prosecutors allege that he failed to register as a sex offender in Rhode Island. He faked his own death and then changed his name multiple times to evade arrest, even moving to Europe. However, the defense contends that the alleged victims are bitter exes and only want to get back at him because of a bad breakup. Now, we cannot air the names of the victims, which is why from time to time you may hear the audio cut out when various attorneys or the judge is speaking. Now, the attorneys have given their opening statements, and now we're going to watch the attorneys argue over upcoming evidence. This is outside the presence of the jury.
Anybody need the benefit of the record?
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, the state isn't moving for a mistrial at this time, but we are very concerned with the narrative of missing puzzle pieces when the entire history of this case over the last 6 months has been the defense arguing to omit many of those 500 puzzle pieces and the court ruling that way, based on the law, of course, but just a concern that the defense removed pieces and is now presenting a narrative that pieces have been removed. I think that's very problematic. Also concerned, and I'm not asking the court to do anything about it now, but it will be an ongoing concern, and we'll be watching for things like that because we didn't remove these pieces. And then I guess the other part is just the also have concern, and we can address this if and when these witnesses testify, but the relevance of officers' decisions not to screen charges. I think that's another issue.
You're not asking me to do anything, so there's nothing I'm going to do. Ms. Dugan, you want the benefit of the record?
Just briefly, Judge. I mean, the reason that certain things were omitted from this puzzle was because they ran afoul of Rule 404B as well as other basic principles of rules of evidence like relevance and Rule 403. So I mean, it's a theme that we have, and I think it is completely fair to say that there is a lack of corroborating evidence. If the state disagrees, then, you know, perhaps we will see that corroboration, but it's a theme for the jury to consider, and we don't intend to try to discuss things that have been previously excluded. So that's, I guess, if the state's concerned, that's on them.
Mr. Simmons, I did not perceive any problem there. They're arguing that all of these metaphorical pieces aren't there because there are facts that are missing from being able to convict him, which I think any defendant in any case would argue. So I guess as we go on in the case, if there are problems, let me know. Other than that, the next witness is whom? And are there any, I have the exhibit list, are there any exhibits that you intend to use with her that Ms. Dugan, that you were going to be objecting to? And if so, let's see if we can address those in advance.
So,
Through her, I intend to admit exhibits 1 through 11, 13-1, and 14.
Just as a heads up, Ms. Dugan, are there any of those that you're going to be objecting to? And if you say no, you're not waiving anything.
No,
something comes
I was
up.
just, I doubt that I would be objecting through 1 through 11. I've reviewed them in advance. We had a conversation about exhibit number 12 that I believe the state will not even be moving to admit. I do have an objection to state's exhibit 14, bless you, where the court, I think, was pretty clear that the state was not to be using photos that have like government markings or in any other way look like mugshots. And state's exhibit 14, it looks like a government building. It looks like a mugshot. And so I would be objecting to that it is more
All right, well, I
prejudicial
guess-
than it is probative.
All right.
Because additionally, the court sort of hoped that the state would whittle down all of the photos through his adult life. And I have a hard time seeing how she can lay foundation for a lot of these photos because they are after
Well, it
the
sounds
fact.
like he was just going to address one of the photos. Is that right, Mr. Simmons?
Yes.
So just 13-1?
13-1.
And then are you-
And 14.
Okay, so then the state's exhibit 13-2 through the end, you would not be moving to admit at all?
Through her.
Okay.
Through Detective Coates, I intend to admit all of them.
Sure. Which again, it 13 feels like a lot. I do appreciate we did whittle down from 20, but I just continue to not understand how that doesn't run afoul of Rule 404B.
How many
and that it's
images are there
cumulative.
in Exhibit 13?
There are 12.
And I will note that state's exhibit 13-2, which is what looks like a mugshot and I believe to be his mugshot from sometime in Ohio, I would be continuing to object to.
Okay. I'll take a look at that, but at least for purposes of the next witness, we're not going to get to that. So let's take a short recess.
All right, so as you heard, the first witness called by the state would be the victim in this case. And by court order, we cannot show you her testimony, so we'll move on from that. I'll bring in my guest now, still with us, attorney, former prosecutor Randolph Rice. Randolph, you heard the state there. They were a little upset at the reference that you thought was good. I thought was good, great as well. This idea of the missing puzzle pieces. What did you make of their argument?
I think the defense rattled the prosecutors. And while he made this argument that really didn't have any teeth because he didn't say, Judge, I want you to do something about it, he prefaced it, well, I'm not going to ask for a mistrial, but I want you to warn her maybe or do something or say something. And I think the answer the judge was going to say, and he did give it, was, look, she has the right to make these arguments because there might be holes in the prosecution's case. And if you're not happy with how good that argument is, I can't do anything about it. So I think the prosecution's a little rattled here.
Yeah, his argument, Randolph, seemed disingenuous to me. He's basically saying, look, they put in motions, they got some of these puzzle pieces thrown out. So now they can't argue in court that the puzzle's missing puzzle pieces. It didn't make any sense to me at all. That was the point, and I thought the argument made by the defense pointed that out. They said, look, these things were thrown out because rules of evidence say the jury can't see them.
That's right. And she was relying a little bit, too, on the Rule 404, which my guess is probably some sort of relevance argument in that state. But, you know, this is defense's case. They're saying you just don't have the case to the prosecutors, and the prosecutors aren't happy about this opening. This should be pretty eventful if this is the way it's starting out right now.
Yeah, it looks like there's some little acrimony there between both sides. You can always tell at the beginning of a trial. I want to listen back to, because as I said, we can't show the victim's testimony, but I want to show you a little snippet of the opening statement by the state, which gives you a little bit of a highlight of what they would, this jury would hear from the victim about the incident itself. Let's take a listen.
Finally, he calmed down and asked her to go inside to talk. She agreed, but once inside, she told him again that their relationship was not going to work out. He got angry again. He pushed her down on the bed. He got on top of her and he held her down. He spoke in a British accent that he claimed this case had nothing to do with him and insisted that he was Arthur Knight instead of Nicholas Rossi. Finally, in October of 2024, he admitted under oath that he was Nicholas Rossi and Nicholas Alaverdian, and we will ask you to find the defendant, Nicholas Alaverdian, guilty of rape.
All right, Randolph Rice, the facts of the case are that these two were in a relationship. This happened right after about a 2-week whirlwind romance, which she will say, at least according to the defense, that there was no history of violence other than that particular incident. How difficult is it going to be for the state to get a conviction in a case where there was a relationship between the two? Is that still an issue in this day and age?
Yeah, I think it's going to be very difficult. This whole case just seems very difficult because of the fact that there is a delay in reporting. And there's nothing wrong with reporting late. And we always encourage women to come, or men to come forward if they have been a victim. But when you wait that long and you don't contact police, now she does obviously talk to her parents, and those are probably going to be a very important witness for the prosecutor, but the delayed reporting is always difficult for a prosecutor to overcome.
Now, the other thing I wanted to ask you about is one of the big factors in this case, you can't run away from it if you're the defense, is the idea that he ran, right? But here's the thing. He wasn't charged in the second case. She never went to police. So the flight, if you read the record, the flight was because he was being charged with fraud. In another case by the FBI, that's why he was fleeing. He also tells the court, we showed this a little earlier, that he was fleeing because there were credible threats on his life. Apparently, that was his claim. I don't know how verified they were. Now, how important is the flight going to be with those circumstances? Because initially, if you look at it and say he was fleeing from possible rape charges, that's one thing. But he was fleeing for, it seems to be, other reasons.
Yeah, right. I mean, presumably he didn't know about the rape charges at the time of fleeing. But again, the prosecution has to lean really hard into the fact that he is essentially a liar, that he's a con artist, or he's trying to escape bad things, and all the bad things that he does in life, he wants to run away from, and that's why he ultimately went to Europe and ended up in Scotland. You know, the one thing that kind of confuses me is why he doesn't pick a country that he can't be extradited from. But hey, that's a question we may never get an answer to.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I want to lean into, again, what you were talking about, this idea that he's a bad guy. One of the things that I took from the opening statement by the state, they made a big point about the fact that he stuck her with the bill for these engagement rings. He turned into this bad guy, was controlling, was critical of her. It seemed to me that a lot of their cases really boiling down to this idea that this is a bad guy. And I'm wondering how that might play with the jury. Certainly, you don't want to go too far, but that's certainly an issue they have to consider, don't you think?
Yeah, and I think the defense, as you just said, kind of leans to this and says, hey, look, he's a bad guy, right? He doesn't pay for rings. He's doing other things in other states. He's fleeing the country and using different names. But being a bad guy doesn't make you a rapist, or it doesn't make you somebody who sexually assaults people. So I think the defense says, hey, yeah, you found him guilty of being a bad guy, but they haven't found him guilty of being a rapist.